What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today I have another Roblox Studio tutorial for you guys. We're going to be making a bank system that is savable when the player leaves, and so this is very useful for any game where you're going to have tokens. You're going to have an economy system where a player has a job, or they get paid per how long they're in your game. So having a bank system is also a great way to have players just be more interactive in your game, especially if you have ways to make money like robbable banks or something like that. And so if you guys enjoy, please make sure you subscribe and leave a like and a comment. It really helps me out. And if you have anything that you want to see made, please suggest it and I'll see what I can do. I'm always looking for new projects. So without further ado, let's open up our studio and let's get to coding. So the first thing that we're going to do in Studio is we want to create a server script, and in this server script, this is where we're going to create our player values, and this is what's going to keep track of all of the money stats for the player. So we're going to rename this to player value, and the first thing that we want to do is set up a function so that when the player joins, a folder and a value is created in the player. And so the way we're going to do that is with a player added connect function player. And so what that's going to do is when a player joins the game, we're going to create a folder called player stats. So we're going to say local player stats is equal to instance.new folder comma player, and that's going to create a folder inside of the player. And then we want to name this to player stats, and it's very important that you name it so that when you go to find it in another script, you know what it's called. And so the next thing that we want to create is our cache value, and so we're going to say local cache is equal to instance.new. We're going to do an int value int, and then we're going to put it inside of the player stats. And so once we have that, we want to name it, and we're going to just call it cache to keep it simple. And then we want to give it a value, and so we're going to say cache.value is equal to 15,000, something simple. And so now that we have this, what's going to happen when a player joins is it's going to create a folder and a value inside of the folder, and so that's what's going to keep track of all of the players' money. And so that leaves open the leader stats. So if you have another script that uses the leader stats, like a kill counter or maybe like a prison time counter, something similar like that, then this is a great way for you to still have your money stats. And so the next thing we want to do is add our parameters for our data store. And so we're going to say a local currency name is equal to money. We actually want to call that cash instead of money. I'm just so attuned to calling everything money, so I'll end up changing that here soon, later in the script. So the next thing we want to do is set up our data store. And so how we're going to want to do that is we're going to say local data store is equal to game get service and data store service. And so Roblox already has a service for this. All you have to do is call it inside of your script. And so after that, we want to say get data store, and in the parentheses we want to do some quotations, and in this quotations you can just name it whatever you want. I'm gonna call it Caesar Gaviria data store. And so when we do that, it's just going to be saved to that data store name. And so whenever the player leaves, it'll get saved to Caesar Gaviria data store. And whenever the player joins, we'll go into that data store and find the player's cache value so that we can load it for him. And so now that we have that, we can move on to coding the rest of this data store. And so we want to say local ID is equal to currency name ... and then we want to, in quotations, we want to put a dash and then do two more ... and then do player name. And so this is so that we know that the cache of the player name in the data store, and we can find it later on. So once we have that, we're going to want to move on to setting up a function that will see if the save data is equal to nil. So the first thing we want to do is set it to nil, and so this is for new players. So if a new player is joined and there is no data for him, then we're going to want to create some. And we also want to see that if a player joins and he has data and is not set to nil, then we will load his data for him. And so there's a couple of ways that we can do that, but the easiest way to do it is do a pcall function. And what a pcall function is a function that will run, that won't break your script even if it throws an error. And so if the function goes to find some data that can't be found, it's not going to break your entire script. Like if we tried to call a remote event that wasn't there, it would break at that line of code and it wouldn't continue on. But with a pcall function, it'll allow us to continue with the script even if this line of code is not working. And so what we want to do is say save data is equal to data store, get async, and then the ID. And so what that's going to do is set the player's data store, or his save data, to the correct ID so that we can find it. And then we want to say if the save data is not equal to nil, then we want to say money.value or cash.value is equal to save data. And remember, we want to change the currency name to our currency name, and we named our currency name cash instead of money. So it's very important that we do that, otherwise the data save is not going to work. So once we have that, we're going to want to write an else statement here. So if the player's money is nil, or the save data is nil, then we want to go ahead and give him a cash value of 15,000 no matter what. So if the player joins and it turns out he has no save data, then we will go ahead and set his cash value to 15,000. Once we do that, we're pretty much done with the on player join data save. Now what we want to do is make sure the data actually saves when the player leaves the game. And the way that we do that is with a game.players.player_removing_connect function. And in the parentheses of the function, we want to make sure we add the parameter player so that we can get the player's name. And in this player removing function, it's very important that we make sure that the save data is called cash and not money. So the first thing we want to do in here is set our ID, and we're going to say local ID is equal to currency name ... and then the dash, and then we want to do 2 more dots and then player.name, and make sure we have the player, the parameter player in the parentheses beside the function. And so now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we set the data store async to the player's money. And so the way we do that is we say data store set async ID, and then we're going to say player, and we're going to put in the cash value of the player. So we're going to say player.player stats, and then we're going to do the square parentheses, and we're going to say currency name, and then we're going to do dot value. And so now when the player leaves the game, the value should save and set to the data store, and the money will be saved. And so now that our currency script is set up, we can test this and see if it's actually creating the values in the player. It's not going to save yet because I do not have this game published and I don't have HTTP services enabled, and so the values won't save just yet, but we can check to see if the values are there. And this is why we did the pcall function, so that everything would still work. And so as you can see, there's no errors being thrown, and so overall everything seems to be working. Now when we do leave the game, there will be an error thrown, but it's not very important. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to set up a way for the player to get more money. And so the way that we do that is pretty simple. It's pretty simple. So all we're going to do is create a block, and in that block we're going to put a proximity prompt and a script. And in the script we're going to go ahead and set our parameter. We're going to say local prox is equal to script.parent.proximity prompt. And then we're going to create a local function, and we're going to call it pay player. And in this local function, we're going to say local money stats, and then we're going to go find the player's money stats. And the way we do that is game.players, find first child, and let's make sure we have the parameter player. And then in the find first child, we're going to say player.name, and then we're going to say .player stats .cash. And so that'll be our money stat. And then we're going to say money stat.value is equal to money stat.value plus 1,000. And you can put whatever number you want. We're just putting 1,000 so that it's noticeable. It's a noticeable change. And so once we have that, all we got to do is set this function to fire when the proximity prompt is triggered. And the way we do that is we say prox.triggered, connect, and then we say pay player in the parentheses. And so make sure you don't have the parentheses on the function name. You just put pay player inside of the connect parentheses. And so once we do that, we can check to see if it will give us money when we trigger the proximity prompt. So here we go. Let's open up our value to see, and it's at 15,000. Now it's at 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So we're going to stop. We're going to go back to our Explorer, and we're going to put a starter or a screen GUI inside of the starter GUI. And I'm going to name it money display. You can name it whatever you want. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a frame, and I'm going to make it just pretty big, and I'm going to put it in the corner of the player screen. And then I'm going to make the background transparency 1. I'm going to duplicate it and put it inside of itself. And then we're going to make this frame a little bit smaller, and then we're going to center it inside the invisible frame. So once we have that, we're going to insert a label, and we're just going to resize the label so it's fitting inside of the box. And then we're going to duplicate that label and make the second one just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to give them both just a little bit of an offset so that when we center them in this frame, they're not touching the edges, and it gives it a little bit of a better look. So once we have that, we can go ahead and style everything. I'm going to make mine black and the background transparency 0.5. And then the text labels, I'm going to make the background transparency 0.8. And then I'm going to make the background color black as well. And then I'm going to change the text color to white. And then I'm going to change the text font to Luckiest Guy. And if you have a font that you like better, feel free to use it. I'm going to go ahead and change the label names. So the first one I'm going to call title, and then the second one I'm going to call money. And when we do that, that's so that we can find it in the script. And so then on the text of the money, I'm going to change it to a $sign with a colon. I know I made the text size 40, but I settled on making it 20 so that everything fits when the money actually loads. And then we also want to make the text wrapped so that everything fits when the money loads. We don't want it going off of the GUI. But once we have all that set up, the next thing to do is just put a local script inside of all of this and begin coding it. So the first thing we want to do is set up our parameters. We're going to have 3 or 4 parameters here. One for the player, one for the player's money stat, and then one for the player's money. And then we're going to set up a function that when the player's money changes, it'll update the text in this GUI. And so the easiest way to do this is to say local money stat, or local player is equal to game.players.localPlayer, and then local money is equal to we can just do player dot player stats dot cash, and then we can say local money text is equal to script dot parent dot money dot, or we can just do that. So now we can say down here, we can say money text dot text is equal to money stat dot value. And then we want to write a function for when the money stat is changed. So we're going to say money stat dot change connect function, and then the parentheses. So the reason why we use int values is so we can call this changed function. If you used a regular number value, you wouldn't be able to say moneystat.changed because the game wouldn't pick it up. But if you use the int value, you can run this function, and when the value changes, you can call it in a script and have it do things. So that's pretty cool. So you can see that now the money updates, but it's not exactly what we want it to do. So I'm going to go back inside of this local script and kind of edit it a little bit. I'm going to change the text size as well so that everything fits. We're going to call it 20, and then we're going to go into the local script, and beside where it says beside the equal sign, we're going to put some quotation marks, and we're going to put a $sign and then some dots beside all of it, so everything will load and look good. You can put a space beside the $sign. I'm not going to put a space because I want it to be right beside the number. And so once we have that, it should all update properly and there should be no more problems. Boom. So we're not getting any errors. And if we go over to the money giver, you can see that it gives us money and it updates. And so when I stop the game, it's not going to save, and I'll show you the error that it throws. So you can see it says HTTP 404 not found. And so the way that we can fix that is by actually publishing this game and then editing the game settings to fix that. So OBS Studio is not going to record me updating the game because it's in a different tab, but basically what you do is you just go to file and you save the game to wherever you want to save it, and then you go into game settings up there and you go to security and you enable HTTP services and API services, and then we can go into our studio. It'll give us the money, and then when we stop the game, it's not going to give us any errors. And then we can also play the game and our money will save. See, 26,000 guys. So as you can see, it works, and that pretty much concludes our portion of the studio. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment. If there's anything you guys want to see, any kind of tutorials, any kind of different content, make sure to leave a recommendation, and as always, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification button. Hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.